We're about to start.
Once,
Yeah,
all right, you're on.
we're real quiet. We're just going to go ahead and start. Okay. Thank you all very much for being here. We appreciate your presence and your interest. It is 7 o'clock by my thought, so I call this meeting to order. This is the Newfields Conservation Commission monthly meeting, in case you're wondering. Before we start, just a couple of sort of housekeeping items. When you are speaking, please come to this central podium so that we can hear you. 2, people in the back, can you hear me? Am I loud enough? Okay, good. Around the corner, place goes up in flames, run out, it's right there. I'm going to start with asking the commission members, and then we're going to have some preliminary material. So can we start? Caleb, one is
Newfields,
Christine McDade,
Mark Casper, Josh Lent,
Allison Watts, and I am the chairperson.
Lauren Hill.
Christian Lawrence.
Sorry, Missouri, by 6 minutes.
I'm Derek Durbin, council for the town of Newfields.
Okay, thank you. Before we start the general meeting, there are a couple of items that have come up that the commission needs to discuss and consider, which they don't know about necessarily, but we'll bring them up now. So in the interest of being very transparent, Josh Lent has disclosed that he has held a minority stake in a small business that occasionally sold candy through Vernon Family Farm. This possible conflict of interest was discussed with town council in 2023. It was publicly disclosed and discussed in the Conservation Commission meeting in April 17th of 2023. And at that time, the Conservation Commission did not feel that this was a conflict of interest, mostly because of the very small nature of the transactions. This supply relationship has ended prior to this meeting. Mr. Lent is committed to serving on this commission in a fair and impartial manner. Several other members of this commission have interacted with either the Vernon family or with the farm in various manners, possibly buying things at the farm store, discussing things with the owners, possibly attending events. And I don't believe personally that there's any significant conflict of interest on this board, but I would like to open that up for members of the board to discuss and also to disclose if there are any other potential conflicts, for example, signing a petition that might have come before these members. Does anyone have anything they want to say? Nope. Okay, moving on. Thank you. In terms of the agenda, we have been asked if we could do a slight change to the agenda. It's been requested that we move the rebuttals. So the way it works now is we would have presentations from the farm and from adjoining abutters, and then we would have a rebuttal to those presentations. We have been asked if we could move the rebuttals to after public comment, so the rebuttals can also include comments on the public comment. I personally don't object, but I'm asking the commission if they have any objection to changing that in the agenda.
Objection.
No objection. Okay, so that will be a change in the order in the agenda. Given the number of things we're going to discuss, again, to the commission, I would like to suggest that we set some time stops. So I would suggest that we have a time stop at 8:45 p.m. tonight for the end of public comment, including the rebuttals. Then we have an hour of potential discussion. So a time stop at 9:45 for discussion. And that gives us up to 15 minutes for other issues we need to discuss, with a hard stop for this meeting at 10 o'clock tonight. Okay? Everyone have their coffee? All right. No objections to that. Thank you. So just a quick review of where we are and how we got there. In August of this year, the town received a letter from the Director of Charitable Trusts in the Attorney General's office requesting that the Conservation Commission articulate due care regarding parking on this easement at the Vernon Family Farm, also known as the Anderson easement, and suggested that the commission hold a discussion with public input on whether this activity is permitted. That is what we are doing here today. Specifically, we have been asked to consider two questions. They're written here in front of you. They are also on the agenda handout. I'm not going to take the time to read them, but I request that you think about that, particularly if you are interested in making a public comment. Please keep your comments focused on these questions. We have also received public comments written and emailed from many people. I at least have read them all, so we have considered and we appreciate that input of information. And this forum is another opportunity. So the public comment we are requesting, comments will only be from Newfields residents, and we are limiting to 2 minutes per person in order to get out of here in a somewhat timely manner.
You should be signed up on the list if you wish to make a public comment.
If you wish to make a public comment, please sign up on the list. Okay? Any other issues or anything we need to bring forward? Okay. So the next thing on the agenda is presentation by the Vernon Family Farm and abutting property owners. And we have presentation by Vernon Farm for the representatives coming up first. So please take the floor.
Not cover the microphone. Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Amy Manzelli from BCM Environmental and Land Law. It's lovely to see you all tonight. I just want to let you know my last name Manzelli always trips people up. Feel free to call me Amy. It's what most people do. I'm here representing Vernon Family Farm, Vernon Family Kitchen, the Vernons individually, the whole kit and caboodle there. And here with Nicole Vernon, Jeremiah was not able to make it this evening. So I'm just going to get right to it. I will try not to use all the 10 minutes. You received a letter on my letterhead dated October 6th, 2025. I am not going to go over any of that. I know that you have a section on the agenda for questions for myself and for the abutters. So if you have questions on any of that, I welcome those. Instead, I want to address your questions that you've listed out tonight. So number one, does vehicle parking in the easement, is it permitted by the terms of the conservation easement deed? Yes. And here's what we have to say about that. It's permissible under the terms of the easement because it adds to the enjoyment of the farm environment. And that's a super key phrase here for you because it is a direct quote from the definition of farming. We all agree the conservation easement allows farming on the conservation easement area. And so having the public enjoy the farm environment, that's farming. That is part of the state definition of farming. So when visitors hit that, they park on the easement area, and then they go to the easement area outside of the primary event. They enjoy the sights, they enjoy the sounds, they enjoy the smells, they enjoy the feel, you know, pet the animals, all that sort of thing. And they might even be enjoying the taste if they've already grabbed some of the food at the main event. While they mosey about the trails, while they view the pollinator garden, that is enjoying the farm environment. So yes, it's allowed. Next sub-question, does parking in the easement area significantly impair or interfere with the conservation value of the easement? No, it does not. Has the town taken sufficient, and I'm going to answer these three questions here and then going to get into the details. Has the town, by its Conservation Commission, taken sufficient steps to determine that the parking does not negatively impact the soil? Yes, this Conservation Commission has taken sufficient steps to satisfy its duties. And if the parking does negatively impact the soil, Can it be remedied afterwards? And the answer is yes, definitely. So let me get into the why we think these are the answers. First of all, especially for those of you who are newer to the commission, you guys have one of the most excellent habits I have seen of annual monitoring for conservation easements. You guys have an annual monitor out there every single year. Every single year, you receive the report and you go over the report and you discuss the report in public session at one of your noticed public meetings. And then you act accordingly. Some of the years, there has not been any action needed. Other years, for example, in 2024, when you read the report, you decided, you know, we haven't gotten an updated management plan from them, and it is time for us to do that. So let us request one. And they gave you one. You got an updated management plan in September of 2024, which is the management plan that you have on file under which the farm is operating today. Second, I want to share with you some excerpts from an email that the Vernons and I received from Commissioner Jasper today, apologizing for not being able to attend today because he had 3 things on his calendar and like myself, perhaps like some of you, has not nailed that being in more than one place at a time thing. He says, for parking on undisturbed land, it could go back into production by simply plowing it, harrowing it, applying fertilizer, and planting crops on it. So that's what our State Commission of Agriculture, Markets and Food says about your question. If there is an impact, can it be remedied? He says yes. And then he talks about and I mentioned this in my letter, the Litchfield conservation easement that is allowed to be operated as a golf course, in part because there's a restoration plan. And he says, the parking area in this case doesn't even need a restoration plan. It's so easy to return it back to productive use. Third, you've done your duty because you are keeping up with the management plan. When Vernon Family Farm first started operating on the conservation easement area in 2014, you made sure that they gave you a management plan. The conservation easement calls for that to be updated every 10 years. 2024, there you were, right on time, making sure they got you an updated management plan. And then fourth, I just want to go a little bit more into detail about abating compaction and compaction in agriculture. So compaction, this is really important for tonight. Soil compaction is not unique to parking cars at this area for agritourism events. Instead, soil compaction is a common occurrence at all farms. It is a common occurrence, regardless of whether you have agritourism events or not. Things like livestock, tilling, and just farm equipment and other agricultural practices that happen every day cause soil compaction. And because it's so common, it's readily known how to restore the soil after it's experienced compaction. So staying off your soils when they're wet, keeping them as dry as possible so they're not wet from stormwater runoff and what have you. And then when you do have compaction, turning over the soil, reseeding, harrowing, as the commissioner mentioned, and that is what you need to do to abate compaction. All right. And I also want to mention in this category of, are you, the commission, doing your duty to make sure that this conservation easement area is managed appropriately? You also should be considering the other 29 acres, right, that are covered and protected by this conservation easement. And in those acres, the farm has replaced European grass. They've turned over the soil and replaced it with native grasses. They've put in a large pollinator meadow. And they've been adding compost to their pastures and to their other productive agricultural land, increasing organic content for that soil, and making major improvements overall. So we are here tonight to, of course, answer any questions that you may have, but most of all, to request that the Conservation Commission tonight vote that this parking continues to be allowed because it comports perfectly with the terms of the conservation easement. Thank you all for your attentiveness and your consideration. We want to continue collaborating with the Conservation Commission as the farm has for the past decade. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Now we have another presentation by
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Parent with McLean Middleton, and I'm here representing some of the neighboring properties, Ruth Patterson and Gerald Cox, Mark and Lynn Gerard, and Scott Washma. I want to recognize at first that I understand that this has been a contentious property with lots of emotions and feelings happening over several years. But the Charitable Trust Unit has done you a favor in terms of limiting what you as the commission will be considering this evening. And in answer to question number one, the answer is no. And how did the commission simplify what you're going to do today? First, agritourism is irrelevant. The Charitable Trust Unit, I'll refer to as the CTU, has told you this and has addressed it in its letter, in essentially rebuking the Vernon Family Farms suggestion that agritourism is allowed in the easement deed by the statute. We've heard something a little different today about the definition of farming and a suggestion that there's a statute for farming, again, outside of the easement language. Director Dempsey at the Charitable Trust Unit has explained the concept of agritourism didn't exist until after Meg Anderson created this easement. Therefore, she could never have intended what is defined as agritourism within what she defined as agriculture in the easement. The intent of the grantor is determined at the time of the conveyance and the specific words used. That's what you look at. Agritourism is irrelevant, and farming by a statute that is outside the easement is irrelevant. This saves you a lot of time and has helped you in terms of what is prohibited activity in this area. This makes it much more defined, and that's the second way the CTU has helped you. And Director Dempsey has told you that the easement expressly defines what is allowed as agriculture in the use limitations. And the CTU has also told you that it believes that the easement requires that the activity be for agriculture on the easement property and not somewhere else on the property. That's on page 7 of Director Dempsey's letter. If you look at that, then the activity must be agriculture on the easement property to be allowed. This is importantly, there is nothing in the easement deed that talks about activity on the easement property for another property. Or more specifically, there's nothing in the easement deed that talks about parking on the easement for another property. So it's prohibited. If it's not listed as one of the identified things that can happen as part of agriculture and the definition of agriculture, it is prohibited. You can stop there. There is nothing said about parking on the easement for another property. This is directly in the plain language of the easement. Again, nothing is in the language. You must look to the language that is used by the grantor. The sacred intent of the grantor is what we have here. And the CTU told you this, that only what is listed in agriculture for this property may occur on this property. If, however, the commission is going to be looking at or considering extending the language as written in the easement deed, and look at this non-easement property, it follows that any use of the easement property must be consistent with the easement deed. It makes sense. The CTU said you can only do on the easement property what is allowed for agriculture as listed in the easement. So it makes sense. If you're going to allow something on the easement deed property, it has to be consistent with that. You can't use the easement property for a use that wouldn't be allowed. That would be allowing a property to commandeer the easement deed property for their own commercial use. And we know commercial use is not allowed because the CTU has already told you that and defined that in terms of what is allowed. As to the question, again, does the conservation easement permit parking for uses that are prohibited by the conservation easement? The answer is no. The CTU formed that question for you and got you to that answer, which is no. So let's consider this example. If the Vernons were asking you to use the conservation easement for parking for a bowling alley, or how about a used car lot? I don't think there'd be any doubt that parking isn't permitted. Those are clearly beyond what is allowed. The question is a straightforward and easy one. Does the conservation easement allow parking for a prohibited activity? If the answer is for bowling alleys and for a used car lot is no, the answer is no here. For dinners, for concerts, and for entertainment. Now, the Vernons have argued that Meg Anderson didn't specifically list parking as a prohibited use, but she doesn't have to. And the CTU told you this because she listed what was allowed on the property. She didn't have to list what wasn't allowed because if it's not on that list, it's not allowed. I would like to touch, we submitted a letter to the commission that was dated October 16th of 2025. Tom Donovan also submitted a letter dated October 14, and I want to touch a little bit upon the letter that he submitted. If you've looked at that letter, Tom Donovan is the former director of the Charitable Trust Unit. He has years of experience in administering in these conservation easements. Tom's letter helped narrow the issues that you must consider under New Hampshire law. And it's right there. He cites RSA 564B1-112. The intent of the grantor of a conservation easement is sovereign and paramount. Your legal and fiduciary obligations are to uphold Meg Anderson's conservation easement and the words that she put in that conservation easement to protect her wishes. And she did not include parking, and she did not include anything that is outside of that express definition that the CTU, Director Dempsey told you, an express definition of what is allowed on the property. Meg Anderson's family in the executrix of her will wrote to the CTU and informed them what Meg wanted. Quote, currently the town of Newfields allows the Vernons to use this land as a parking lot, deteriorating the land for agricultural purposes. We can confidently state that this was not the intent when putting the land she took so much pride in for conservation. Strictly prohibited, there is no doubt what Meg Anderson intended. There is no doubt that she left out parking as allowed use. It's prohibited, period. And certainly prohibited for a use that's not allowed on the conservation easement. And whether parking is incidental or primary doesn't matter. It's not allowed. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And thank you both for staying on time. So we moved this agenda around a little bit, so the rebuttals are going to come a bit later, but we do have an opportunity now for questions from the commission members to the two speakers. And I'll yell louder. Okay, sorry. So this is an opportunity for commission members if they have questions for the speakers.
With the agritourism wording, while that statute postdated its deed by a few years, is it more of a semantic issue? Because in the deed, it does mention maple products, maple syrup, if their own, things like that, which is that essentially the same thing without that word attached to it?
Just a quick point of order. Do you want us to pop up and down every time or?
People have a question, please direct it at the person you think best suited. Otherwise, we will give each of you an opportunity. You also have an opportunity in the rebuttals. I will ask you, please, not to be noisy, to make comments. You are here to listen. So please keep it a little bit calmer out there. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Sure, I think you can interpret it as a matter of semantics. It's obvious that part of what was included in the conservation easement language would now be considered agritourism, even though agritourism wasn't part of the state statute at the time the conservation easement was written. But I think much more importantly, the conservation easement does not define farming and agriculture. There's no definition of farming and agriculture in the conservation easement. The words there are including activities such as maple, There's no definition. It doesn't say shall be defined as. There's no language like that in the conservation easement whatsoever. And that's very important for the farm's position.
Well, actually, I have a question for Amy and then I will let you go. You mentioned that the definition of farming, enjoying the farm environment.
Yes.
Can you give me the date and the document for that definition?
The document is RSA 2134A. I can't give you the subsection off the top of my head, but it's within the state definition of farming and agriculture, RSA 2134A, and I can give you the subsection sometime tonight when I double check.
I need the subsection. I want to know is that definition in the version of farming that was in place in 2004?
No.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question about Rumble?
All right, sorry.
Okay, yes.
Mine kind of follows that. You had mentioned that under the terms of the easement, it mentions, and you specifically said enjoyment of the farm allows parking on the easement. But when I look at the purposes of the easement states that it's for enjoyment of the easement, the land under easement. So I'm just wondering a clarification there, because it seems to me that if I'm parking on the easement to go to the farm to enjoy, it doesn't seem like parking is enjoyable. So my question to you is that statement accurate that from what I can tell, the easement doesn't specifically say you can park on the easement for enjoyment of the farm. Instead, it says that one of the top purposes is to be able to, and in fact, it actually reads, for the scenic enjoyment of the general public. And so, again, I question as to whether or not parking is actually allowing scenic enjoyment of the eastman.
Sure. Thank you for the question. So farming is allowed, right? The conservation easement clearly allows farming on the conserved 30 some odd acres.
Mhm.
So part of farming is having the public come to a farm to enjoy the farm environment.
But are you enjoying the easement? So we're actually focused on the easement. We're not focused on the,
Well, the whole thing is a farm.
right, but
You know, on those 30 some odd acres is where livestock are pastured, poultry are pastured, livestock are giving birth. And when the public comes to the farm, I'm glad you asked this question because it's a really important point. When the public comes to a farm for an agritourism event, they both go to the exclusion area, those 2 acres or so where there is no conservation easement, and go to the 30 some odd acres where there is a conservation easement. And it's in those 30 some odd acres where they are enjoying the scenery, smelling the farm, perhaps tasting some of the food, hearing the animals, touching the animals. So that's the enjoyment of the farm on the 30 acres where it is conserved. And I think hopefully we can agree that it's unreasonable to expect people to get there without a vehicle.
Thank you.
Thank
Let's, turn down Ms. Karen.
Going to remember the questions. I think your question was, is this semantics agritourism? Because it allows, there's a list, right, that allows picking, and you, I think you mentioned maple syrup, right? Agreed. Some of the items that Meg Anderson listed perhaps fall into that category of agritourism today, right? Picking your own strawberries. It's not just semantics. She identified exactly what she was going to allow. She didn't list everything. She listed a finite list, which Deputy Dempsey from the Charitable Trust Unit said is the definition of agriculture in this deed. I think we heard council suggest that the easement deed doesn't define agriculture and doesn't define farming. It does define agriculture. It doesn't define farming because it doesn't reference it. It says agriculture in section 2, agriculture and forestry. Those are the words that are defined in terms of what is allowable on the property. It is not semantics. The clear intent of the grantor, Meg Anderson, in this property, is what she put down in a list of items that are allowable. And concerts, dinners, adult comedy, entertainment, not listed. So it's not semantics, it's taken care of. We've heard definition of farming, and the question was asked, where is that from? Council cites a statute. Statute wasn't in place. She answered your question, was not in place at the time of the easement. And there's no reference in the easement to the statute. There couldn't be. Couldn't have been her intent. She listed out what she intended the property to be used for. If some of these fall into what we consider agritourism today, then they're allowed. Anything not listed is prohibited. Parking's not listed. Concerts aren't listed. Chicken dinners aren't listed. Adult entertainment's not listed. Comedy's not listed. It's not allowed. And then going to, I believe the question, it talks about the purpose is to enjoy the easement. That goes back to what I was talking about, is there's nothing in the easement deed that says you can park here so you can go and enjoy that adjacent property. That non-easement property, you can park here. She didn't include it. She didn't include it. She didn't include it because it's not allowed. It wasn't part of her intent. They were going to come enjoy agriculture as she defined it on the easement property. And on page 7, that's what Director Dempsey is telling you. She cites to that. She says, the Charitable Trust Unit believes that what happens, agriculture is allowed on this property, as is defined. And Attorney Dempsey told you it is defined. Agriculture is defined. You don't have to use including, but not limited to. In fact, she didn't use that language at all here. And she did use the word shall, contrary to what council said. Shall include. And then she lists things out. That's a finite list. There is no other language to suggest that other things get listed in there is to read into that deed language that she decided not to put there. So nothing about enjoying this adjacent property is in there. Again, it's a non-easement area. And I will say the CTU helped this commission by citing to the Windyhurst farm case. And Tom Donovan in his letter on page 2 suggests, page 5 says it's akin to the current situation. Any parking to support a commercial use off the easement is prohibited and violates the terms of the easement. That's exactly what we have here.
Sorry. I'll just go quickly. So you have stated that because parking is not specifically listed in the easement, it is a prohibited activity. Is that correct?
Correct.
All parking?
So that's a good question, right? Parking, maybe there's some parking to come and enjoy the property. But what the CTU also said is they don't need this easement property for parking, except for when there are concerts and agritourism activity on the other
What
property.
about farm parking? What about?
So parking farm vehicles, there's a separate section in the easement deed that talks about farm vehicles, but it is subject to the same limitation, which goes to your second question. Are the soils being impacted in an adverse way?
Parking is allowed under some circumstances.
For tractor vehicles with some limitations that if it starts to impede the soils, then I believe it's not allowed.
Thank you.
I have a question about a couple times you've said if it's not listed, it's prohibited. On what basis are you saying that?
It's a finite list. And Deputy Dempsey of the Charitable Trust Unit said the deed has defined what agriculture is and what is allowed on the use limitations. And
Advisory, that's not.
it's not advisory, shall include.
Dempsey's letter is advisory. It is not, it's his opinion. It's not
Her opinion. The CTU believes that it is expressly identified. It's also how you interpret, right? Contracts. We have language in a deed that you as a commission are to strictly construe. And strictly construe means you look at the language, you look at the definition that Meg Anderson said, agriculture shall include these things. Those are the only things that are allowed on the property.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from the commission?
Sorry. Are you moving on from that then?
Let you do one.
This is the Amy.
Quick answer.
Anzelli. Okay, I got it right.
Yep, thank you.
What mitigations occurred and do you have records for it?
So thank you. So for mitigation on an annual basis after the agritourism season is over is when they do rotational grazing with their livestock in that area. They also do make efforts to rotate the parking throughout the agritourism season. And they also have measures in place to keep the area dry. Rain is rain, but there are stormwater runoff controls.
There's no overturning of the soils.
No. That, I will say that is an option that is available, but they have not done that yet. In their estimation, compaction is not, it's not severe or even significant. That's something you would do when you have a very severe compaction problem.
Has there been any testing on that soils then?
Yeah, yes, but we cannot verify the exact year right now.
Heard of it?
No, that's not accurate. We do not have the records here.
We could request that.
Yes, absolutely. And we'd be happy to provide those records.
Thank you.
I have two more questions. If I may.
Okay.
The one question I had, one is for both of you, and one question specifically, you referenced a Litchfield easement where they're allowing golf. I guess my question with that one is, are there allowances, specific allowances in that easement that are clear allowing that type of activity?
Thank you for the question about the Litchfield example. That is referenced with detail in my October 6th letter. And no, there are no clear allowances in the conservation easement that would expressly allow for it's not just allowing golf, it's the operation of a golf course, like turf, sand, holes, etc. But the key there was that there was, the owner of the easement was satisfied that it could be restored.
The other question for the two of you, so maybe since you're up there, not to make you do Simon Says here. The other question I had was around, vehicles and tractors were brought up. And then looking at the easement, it talks about the easement property must be maintained in perpetuity as an open space with no industrial or commercial activity except agriculture and forestry. So I guess the question there is tractors, cars, would those be considered industrial or commercial?
Those would be commercial. And again, thank you for the question, because I do want to make clear to the commission, commercial activity is allowed on this conservation easement property. Farming and agriculture is a commercial endeavor. So when folks say, oh, no commercial things on this property, that is not true with respect to agriculture. So this entire property is game and open to commercial activity, limited to agriculture. And our position, of course, is that that includes agritourism. Because yes, the CTU's letter is an advisory letter, and there's nothing in the conservation easement that says there's a definition of agriculture. There's an inclusion of what agriculture, the activities that must be considered agriculture, but that is not an exhaustive list.
So what happens on other easement properties is irrelevant to what is in front of the commission in terms of what the easement deed says for this case. And I want to first address, I don't think they answered your question. There are no documents that we have seen in terms of soil tests or any of these mitigation items that we've seen in the letter from council to this commission. We haven't seen what they've said they've done yet in this case. You would think that you would see it by now. In terms of vehicles and commercial use is allowed for agriculture and forestry. Meg Anderson then defined what she meant by that commercial use under the definition of agriculture. Again, we keep going. We want to go beyond the language in the document. It's right in front of you. The only thing that's allowed of any commercial nature, she defined as agriculture in the easement deed. Again, that's the guidepost. And the charitable trust unit has sort of laid out their view of how this guidepost is interpreted and followed for this case.
Thank you. All right, I would like to move on to public comment. So the way this is going to work, make sure I'm in the right place here. The way this is going to work, for those of you who have signed up, you're going to come up. You've got 2 minutes. I will be glaring at my phone here. Bill Meserve, I think you signed up first. I'm going to ask, because we can't see the list. So when you have said your piece, please say the name of the next person who signed up, so that way I don't have to keep track.
Who's gonna do that? Over there.
You're right. So you know what? Somebody over there.
Why don't you do that?
Yeah. Okay. Let's move. Can you move the list up to the podium?
He's gonna keep time.
Time has not started yet.
Just state your name that you're addressing these notes. Right.
So you wrote it on the sheet, but also please state your name and address. Why don't you just start and that will get here eventually.
Thomas Irv, 12 River Road, Newfields, also a planning board member. First of all, thanks for doing what you all do, because I know what it's like, okay? But most of all, thanks for finally, after all this time, having a public hearing on this. You know, I think we, the taxpayers of Newfields, purchased this easement, and it's nice to be able to start talking about it. First thing I want to talk about is planning, just from our zoning for commercial use requires parking. So therefore, where the parking is would be considered commercial. I think it's as simple as that. The other thing the major thing is I was tasked by the planning board to keep track of the Great Bay General Permit. I don't know if you all, know about that, but we're required by EPA, DES to monitor stormwater. You saw the rain gardens outside. And that was basically the planning board because of my professional background. The system has a database where I have to go in and every site plan review, put it into the system. UNH is developing this system, and I went to them during a training session and said, hey, we have a situation where we have a planning approval and they're allowing parking on the conservation easement. And there are people from DES, the EPA, UNH Stormwater Center, the Melissa Palais from PrEP, she's the Great Bay Waterkeeper, and they were all just, I'm like, you got to be kidding. And they said that cannot be happening. You cannot park in a conservation easement. They then brought up the granite showing impervious surface and how much just over the course of 3 or 4 years on the easement it had increased. So what they informed me I needed to do was, when I report to EPA and DES, is to take 2.5 acres of conservation land out of Newfields count. And they said there's really no mechanism to change an easement because the easement is with the deed, but we're not, and I want to be transparent with EPA. I brought this up to Concom last July 24. The other thing I want to talk about is they went and told me what
Finish up.
a good thing is to reference 79A, which is current use. And if you go and look at current use, and it's mentioned in the easement and in the also in the CTU's letter, that you have to discount parking is not allowed. Parking is not allowed in a conservation in current use. Driveways are not allowed, roads are not allowed. And that's what they referenced me. And that's also, I think you should really look at that if you're doing due diligence, 79A, because in 79A, I just want to read it to you.
No, you don't need to read it to us.
No, I know, just a little bit. It is hereby declared to be public interest to encourage the preservation of open space, thus providing a healthy and attractive outdoor environment for work and recreation.
You got 2 minutes.
You are the example, dude.
Okay. I didn't get the good part.
Thank you.
Hobie Harmon.
Large, so it sounds in 2 minutes.
It did for me.
Second board's Bill's appreciation to the board, the Conservation Commission for the work you're doing on this. Hobie Harmon, 189 Exeter Road in Newfields. One of the questions I have been asked in town is what dogs the town have, or what fight is there involved in this? The town paid $71,000 for this conservation easement back in 2004. So I've gotten that question from a lot of people. One of the questions that I raised previously to the Conservation Commission was in regards to the Sarah Callahan memo of 5 December 22. And she talks about the fee, Vernon Family Farms fees pay for the concert or event or the comedy show, the event. She didn't say comedy show. They hadn't had those yet. And then additional costs for dinner, drinks, and parking. And then she summed it up by parking will not be allowed on the easement area if activities outside the easement area were to be determined to be something other than commercial agriculture. And so the concern that she raised was as to compaction. Bill just briefly talked about contamination, hydrocarbons, and metals getting into there. One point I would raise on that is that the town will be liable for the contamination issues as the monitors of the conservation easement. Finally, I have been unable to find where the information from her memo of 5 December 22, which was received on the 5th, was provided from the chair of the Conservation Commission to the chair of the Planning Board before they made their December on 8 December of 22 in regards to the terms and conditions. So there's a piece of document that I can find no record of with relevant information and pertinent information by the easement monitor that should have been provided to the. Finally, I just want to offer some thoughts on subject matter expertise and knowledge, firsthand knowledge, as well as documents from relevant and attached family members. It is the responsibility of the Conservation Commission to hear those documents, inputs, and weigh them themselves as to veracity and gravitas of those contributions from those people that submit them. There is not an opportunity just to say, no, we're not going to listen to them, or they all have the same value. It's up to the board to determine that factor. Thank you.
And can you, Hobie, or someone, can you tell me who's next?
That is Lucas Raymond, maybe, 96 Halls Mill.
Thank you.
Yep, I'm Lucas Raymond, live 96 Halls Mill Road, lived in town pretty much my whole life. I just want to point out a few things. One, this property is under an easement which specifically mentions agriculture as a use permitted, which is extremely important. And I mean, if we're just playing whatever we think Meg Anderson thought when she did it, I think she thought it was important to protect that it was going to be able to be a farm in the future. The statute 21, section 34A, subsection B, or 5A, specifically states agritourism as a permitted agricultural use. And that is due to how hard it is to farm nowadays. It's extremely difficult to maintain a farm as being viable, profitable, however you want to say it. And it is imperative that we continue to allow these agritourism events, which rely on temporary parking once in a while in a field that is very blatantly a field, not a parking lot. If anyone ever goes there and walks around, it's extremely obvious it's just a field. Half the year, it's got 2 foot, 3 foot tall grass in it. So it's being maintained exceptionally well. The Vernons go above and beyond to maintain their soil health. They do all sorts of other measures outside of the small area that gets parked on once in a while. And on top of that, we are also claiming that people park in that and go to these events that are off of the conservation easement. But I know for a fact, because I go to these events, that people that park in those also enjoy the entire conservation easement. They walk around the wildflower pastures. They walk around the entire farm looking at animals. Everyone does that. I would say probably, this is obviously my personal estimate, but more than 3/4 of the people that go there all are enjoying the conservation easement that is on. So thank you for your time. I think it's really important that we support farming in our community. I know right now, as it stands, I would never consider buying.
Thank you. Okay. That's all right. You know what? If you hand it to me,
Okay.
I will read it off and then we won't have to keep doing this. Okay, thank you. Okay. Rory Patterson? Ruth Patterson, sorry.
Ruth Patterson, I just simply have a petition that was sorry, 295 Cassock Road, Newfields. So we have a petition that is really specifically just about the easement, the intent of Meg Anderson, and as it was written, and that parking is not part of it. We did go around and get Newfields residents. There are just just less than 190 some odd to be exact. And they're all town residents, but two. There's two non-residents. One was a former resident that left because of this situation. And the other one is another longtime member of the community that has put her land in conservation and is very concerned about how her land would be handled in the future based on some of these decisions.
Thank you. Right. And very timely, very short. Thank you. All right, Deb. Oh, I'm going to start with a P and stop there.
I have a letter that,
Sorry, name and address first.
Debbie Polenzio, 30 Main Street. I have a letter from a Newfields resident who couldn't be here tonight that I'd like to read.
Yes. We have at least two of those.
All right. Her name is Nancy Gilmore. She lives at 95 Falls Mill Road in Newfields. On August 30th. Okay. You know more than I do.
I do.
On August 30th, 2004.
No, excuse me. To read the letter, please. But you are a Newfield resident.
I am.
Is a Newfields resident.
And this one has conservation land in town. Okay, can I continue? On August 30th, 2004, I signed a conservation easement with the town of Newfields, putting 30.97 acres into a conservation easement. This can be found at book 4354 and page 0123. A little over 2 months earlier, Marguerite Anderson had done the same on June 9th, 2004, book 4307, page 2054, for her property at 301 Piscassic Road. If you look at the paperwork, it's almost identical, as we were both looking for the same. We wanted our land to remain as it was or used for agricultural purposes. We also had been told that at that time, the Conservation Commission would oversee and make sure that the terms of the easement were always followed. It has come to my attention that the intent of the easement, as well as the terms written in the document, are not being followed. Our easements were aligned before agritourism existed. But legal documents are not contingent upon the evolution of industry, but instead are binding legal contracts. Meg's property has significant roadside presence, and the easement clearly states that the property was to remain scenic and that both stone walls would not be disturbed. To date, neither of these have been upheld. Both of our intentions in conserving our land were to keep it as close to nature as possible, and building a parking lot on it where grease, oil, and gas can get into the soil does not align with the language of the easements. I am very disappointed that Meg's easement has not been upheld, and I can only hope that mine always will be.
Thank you. Thank you. Right. Mark and Lynn Gerard.
Gerard is Lynn Gerard, 298 Wiscasset. I'll just read this for the brevity of it to get it up. Thanks for doing this, by the way. We speak to you not only as neighbors of the Anderson Conservation Easement, but also as fellow conservation landowners and invested members of the Newfields community. Our concerns regarding the management of the Anderson easement, specifically the allowance of parking, has been raised numerous times before the board, and we wish to articulate these concerns and respectfully request your thoughtful consideration. Over the years, the town of Newfields has been entrusted with a significant amount of conservation land. The town residents voted on separate occasions to invest $3.5 million into conservation land, which we're currently still paying off. This has resulted in over 700 acres of town held easement and town-owned land on the Newfields conservation map, which you can kind of see over there. These votes were not just final financial commitments. They were promises to uphold the values and the intentions of those who placed their land and towns in town care. We've reviewed all the conservation easement deeds in town of Newfields, unfortunately, and found their language to be very similar. For example, when we purchased our home, we learned that parking was prohibited on the neighboring Bryn conservation easement property, which led to the closure of the Windruck Winery. Both the Bryn and Anderson easements were drafted months apart by the same law firm, contained similar provisions, yet parking was prohibited on one, the Bryn property, but allowed on the other, the Anderson property. Such inconsistencies make it difficult for neighbors and prospective buyers to make informed decisions and may create future complications for future homeowners and the town. We also want to make a point that financial incentives for conservation land are substantial and justified only by the strict adherence of the easements themselves. Us personally, we pay approximately $20,000 in annual taxes for our 9 acres of unconserved land. For our 14 acres of land, however, which is under the conservation easement, our annual tax bill is only $14. This reduced rate reflects the restrictions placed on the conservation land. If these restrictions are not upheld, it raises questions about fair taxation and the integrity of the conservation program as a whole for current and future landowners. Voila.
So you're not signed in separately.
Mark and Lynn Gerard, 298.
You had 2 minutes.
We are each an individual resident, and I expect that I get my 2 minutes as well.
I would like you to sign in separately.
Fine.
Sign you in right now. Okay, so you have another 2 minutes. I'll just sign you in.
All right, former charitable trust unit director of the Attorney General's office, Tom Donovan, states Ms. Anderson required in the easement that the Conservation Commission assured the protection and conservation of open space in the 30-acre easement area to preserve it forever as an important forest land, field, wetland, and wildlife habitat area. She further required that any productive capacity of the easement area to produce agricultural crops shall not be degraded by on-site activities. The maintenance of a parking lot for dinners, music, concerts, and entertainment is precisely opposite of that. He further states in his letter, the Conservation Commission should send a message by prohibiting the current parking practices on the easement, that it will enforce easements it now holds, the accordance with their terms. We are the easement holders of the Houghton Conservation Easement. Unlike Ms. Anderson, who conserved all but 2 acres of her land, Ms. Houghton kept 9 acres of her land out of conservation. Our conservation easement totals 14 acres and includes a 1.acre exclusion area and a 50-foot wide access easement, which are not subject to the deed terms. It also specifically allows for a parking area under certain conditions. In contrast, the Anderson Conservation Easement does not include an exclusion area or provisions for parking. Additionally, if you take a look at the Cole Farm easement, the survey deeded plan includes a potential parking area. If Ms. Anderson had intended for parking or a driveway to be permitted on the land she so thoughtfully conserved, she would have included such language as Ms. Houghton and those involved with the Cole Farm deed did in their deeds. As stewards of the land and advocates for responsible land management, we strongly encourage you to set aside the emotions that have transpired over this situation and look at the deed as it was written 21 years ago, with the intent to not only conserve this land, but to make it a scenic byway for those traveling Passaic Road. It's obvious Ms. Anderson loved this land. With the amount of signatures from residents supporting the protection of the Anderson Conservation Easement, it is apparent that many residents of this town truly hope the town will uphold her wishes. Thank you for your time and thoughtful consideration. I do have some more. Thank you. Whole farm deed, surveyed plan showing the parking, proposed parking.
I think you submitted those in writing as well.
Yeah, thank you. In case you didn't get to take a look at them, this is great, isn't it? Go in the exclusion area where we could park cars.
We've seen all of these. We can look at them now or if you like, but we have seen all of them.
Okay, I just want to make sure everyone saw them.
I'll just
Thank you. All right, Paulette?
What Shoemaker, 19 Railroad Ave. So I am grateful to the town of Newfields because there is so much conservation land. But in order for the residents to be able to enjoy it, where are they supposed to park? If I look at all of the other conservation land, there's an area where you can park. A lot of it is gravelled. The Vernon Farms have a field, right? So it's a temporary parking spot. People aren't there all year long. So if people are supposed to be able to enjoy this beautiful property, where should they park? Because you can't park on Passaic. So, thank you.
Assume that you're clapping because she was so nice and short. Okay, Ashley.
So Ashley McGonigal, 314 Piscassic. I'm in a butter of the Vernon family farm. I moved here from Massachusetts, sorry guys, 5 years ago, drawn by the state motto, live free or die. It resonates with me deeply. As a mental health counselor, I know autonomy is foundational to well-being. The motto promises the right to live freely and with purpose. When I came here, I wanted to escape the constant intrusion I felt elsewhere, the feeling of always being under someone's eye. Before I knew what the Vernons were quietly enduring, I thought that I had found what I was looking for, a community that offers not just a beautiful landscape, but the chance for people to shape their land into something meaningful without being stifled. And I can't help but think that to the Vernons, live free or die feels more like live free or die trying. At every turn, they're under review, signs, noise, land. Does it end when the complaints stop? Or when they simply run out of resources to keep fighting all of you people? So tonight I ask all of you, let's come together not as adversaries, put all this aside. You know, we can live as neighbors. It doesn't have to be like this. Let's support the farm, support the land, support the community's right to flourish. Let's acknowledge that being free to farm, to host responsible events, to engage the public and to use the property for more than their abundance of crops, it doesn't threaten us. It enriches us. It gives your children a place to learn. It offers a breath of fresh air in a world that moves way too fast. We don't need to be a microcosm of what's happening across this country. We can choose to support one another respectfully and use our time, energy, and most importantly, money for good. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you, please, just to listen, okay? I know people feel strongly, but just please listen and let's try to refrain from the applauding. Thomas.
My name is Tom Bolduc. I live at 319 Piscassic, right next to the parking lot, right next to the field. It sounds like this is right now it's a discussion about words. And I won't wade into that, and I won't wade into drainage and compaction. But I will say that the farm is a wonderful place to be, and it offers people of all ages, toddlers to people in, the twilight of their life, to experience beauty and farming and community. And I hope there's a way to figure out how to maintain that and keep that available for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Good job, folks. All right. Bonnie, or did you cross yourself out? It's a little, did Bonnie want to be on this? Okay, maybe not. How about Michael? Michael Sorrow? You're having a little trouble with the handwriting here. Got a Michael, Michaela, 184 Exeter Road. Michael Samir. Good Lord, Mike.
Yeah, actually, I need to go take better handwriting classes. Michael Sununu, 184 Exeter Road. Just a few things here. I think what I want to try to do is convince you or talk about the fact that there are basically three important documents that really should be guiding you here. It's the easement itself and the intent of the easement. And there's, I think, 7 pages outlining the intent of the easement. It's pretty clear through that, and as the lawyers indicated, what types of activities they were going to allow under the easement, and that this town accepted when we purchased that easement. As the second document I would point out is the Donovan letter, because I think he's very eloquent in pointing out that for this body, right, whatever their title, all these persons, including this commission, must administer a donated conservation easement as a fiduciary. Right? It doesn't give you leeway to allow your opinions about this to go to influence your decision. You have to be a judicial body and act as a fiduciary. This requires the highest standard of conduct. Therefore, members of a conservation commission may not administer a conservation easement based upon the wishes of the underlying landowner based upon the influence of the Board of Selectmen, based upon the influence of other people, or based upon popular opinion in town. Simply put, you can't act as politicians, but you are guardians of the Anderson charitable intent. So what's that intent? Well, we've had a lot of discussion here, but I think the easiest way to determine that intent is actually the letter that's been provided from the descendants of the Andersons. And they specifically say, we don't understand why the town is allowing the Vernons to hold these commercial events going against the agreement of the deed. Not to mention that the property is not in a commercial zone. Our aunt and uncle, the people who sold this to the town and asked you to conserve this easement under their intent. Our aunt and uncle would not have stood for this and would not have entrusted the town with their land had they known this would be the outcome. I think it's pretty clear. The intent is the problem. Last real quick point.
Excuse me, that's my job.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Allison. Last real quick point. All of this was basically driven by the notice of decision that was passed by the planning board in December of 2022. As Hobie mentioned, there was actually a monitor report that questioned the commercial activity of that was never provided to the planning board before this decision. That report went to this commission, never provided to the planning board before they had to discuss this. Now, I'm not accusing anybody of doing anything malicious, but I can guarantee you, if this report was before the planning board, that notice of decision would have been radically different than what the planning board approved. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, Ray. Ray? Do we have a Ray? Ray Truman, 318 Piscassic?
Raymond Truman, 318 Piscassic Road. I have a couple of questions for the board. I am concerned about the parking on that piece of property and the amount of oil and road dirt and grease that falls from the cars parking there, going into the groundwater. And a good example of what I mean is if you drive down to the urban gas station parking lot or the post office and you see where the cars park and you see how the hot top is actually eaten away where stuff is dropped. And I'm very concerned about my well. And if my well goes bad, who do I come to? Do I come to the Conservation Commission? Do I come to the state? You know, it's a very troublesome. I was also on the board to actually develop the easements back in 2002 and 2004, and specifically talked to Meg, and Meg indicated to that specific committee that all she wanted was 2 acres, and we had asked her several times, no, do you want more? Do you want more? As a part of the homestead, and she was very, very strict on saying no, 2 acres is fine. One more question for you. If you're going to make a public decision with this, how come the abutters to that specific piece of property were not notified by certified mail? You know, normally that's what happens when you have something like this.
So just to answer that last one, this is not a formal hearing. This is a public meeting of the Conservation
Are
Commission.
you going to be making a decision on this? Yes or no?
We will be making a vote at some point.
Well, then I really think that you should have notified the property owners, you know, as a part of the law. 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. All righty. Allison Clark? Allison Clark? Good. All right. Allison Clark, 376 Piscassic. No. All right. Gina and Leland? Wow. Okay, Tom Bassett. Andrew Walker. This guy's getting points for time.
Hello, I'm Andrew Walker, 62 Halls Mill, professional hydrologist, former member of the CONSCOM. Good to see some familiar faces. I don't envy you. Probably the hardest meeting you guys have all year. Thank you for what you're doing. I've been to the Vernon Family Farm dozens of times. I almost never go alone. I go with my 2 daughters. They're 7 years old. I've been to 3 or 4 of the events, but mostly we go to get food, we go to see the animals, and we go to play on the hay bales. I can honestly tell you that my girls enjoy every inch of that easement and every inch of that farm, from the grass and the mud when we get out of the car to the lambs and the llamas and jumping from hay bale to hay bale. They enjoy every inch of that farm. I'm grateful to the Vernons, and I'm grateful to Mrs. Anderson. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that Mrs. Anderson didn't mention porta potties when she signed that easement, but I'm very grateful that there's a porta potty on that farm with 2 7-year-olds. So I hope we can continue to use the farm as it is today. It's a wonderful resource to my family and to the town. Thank you so much.
Yeah, okay, go with the quiet thing. All right, thank you. Sean McGowan?
Good evening, Sean McGowan, 51 Hemlock, Newfields. Nice to see everyone. I did not plan on speaking this evening, but when I listened to the 2 councils describe the RSA, it left me a little confused because they were saying different things. So I thought, what's your here? And I thought, just for the purpose of the board, I would just read a couple of definitions that may hopefully help you in your determination. The word agriculture and farming means all operations or activities of a farm. Pretty straightforward. Again, that's out of RSA 2134A. So then you ask yourself, well, what is the definition of the farm? And the farm definition is, this means any land, buildings, structures on which agriculture and farming operations or activities take place. So I think one of the things you need to consider is the land and the activities when you make your determination. Is parking a land activity related to the process of farming? I would argue it is. So specifically to the question, is parking within the easement area permissible? I would say it is under the RSA. You'll have to take the determination of reading the conservation easement to determine if there's any overriding factor. Thank you.
All right, David. David from 57 Bald Hill, yes.
Didn't have anything prepared, so. I visit the farm, I shop there regularly, and I visit their vets. And I live 0.75 miles away. And I'd like to say that I don't drive there to pick up my yogurt, but I drive there to pick up my yogurt. I probably shop there 5 times a week. I drive there, I'm 0.75 miles away. When there's an event, I take my bike. But I don't have a kid with me, and these events are very, very family friendly. There's a lot of anywhere from 2 to 10 to 12 to 14 running around. And even though the events end at 7 o'clock, the music, when I go back, it's dark. I've got my phone on because my bike's not rigged. Just to get home, I've got a safety vest. So realistically, what are you asking, or what are the abutters asking? They're saying that a woman who is dead, they know what she's thinking, and her descendants know what she's thinking, but she's not here to tell you. How does this family earn a living and make a place that's good for a community if people can't drive there? Because I do my best to not drive, and I have to drive there most of the time, and I feel but that's just the way it is. So if you're going to tell them that they can't have people parking on the property, which includes the general store. I go there sometimes on a Friday, and there's 6 cars. So if a 7th car would probably be in that area. Are you going to have a monitor set up all the time, or put the general store out of business because people park to get their produce? That's it.
Thank you. All right. That is all the people that have signed up. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? All right. Yes.
Evening. My name is Fran Lane. I wasn't planning on attending tonight, but my wife had you on TV.
Right. Can you give us?
And I decided to come down here because I was the town attorney that did draft this.
You give your address.
My name is Francis Lane. I live at 80 Halls Mill Road in this town. And you'll have to check your conservation easement because I pulled mine up on my computer, the draft I had. I'm pretty sure this is the one that got recorded and signed. But I think, and I'm not going to go through all of it, but I think one of the important sections for the board to focus on, and there was at least one statement tonight that I found to be misleading, whatever, with regard to agriculture and the definition, but use limitations, according to the draft that I have, and I copied the sections out. I'm not going to go through all of them, are set out in paragraph 2. And it says subject to reserve rights. I'll just kind of summarize some parts of it. The property shall be maintained in perpetuity as open space without there being conducted thereon any industrial or commercial activities except agriculture and forestry, including timber harvesting as described below, and provided that the productive capacity of the property to produce forest and or agricultural crops shall not be degraded by on-site activities. For the purpose hereof, agriculture and forestry shall include animal husbandry, floriculture, horticultural activities, production of plant and animal products for domestic or commercial purposes, the growing, stocking, cutting, and sale of Christmas trees or forest trees of any size capable of producing timber or other forest products, the construction of roads or other access ways for purpose of removing forest products from the property and processing and sale of products produced on the property, such as pick your own fruits, vegetables, maple syrup, all as not detrimental to the purpose of this easement. There are several other sections here which specify the activities that can be considered to be conducted on the property. I'm not going to go through them all with you, but they're under the use limitations set forth in paragraph 2. I'm aware that legislation was introduced and passed later by way of agritourism, but I think that you need to deal with the terms of the easement at that time by way of a contract, and not what happened afterwards by way of legislation. But I can answer some questions to the extent that I remember.
Okay, just for reference, could you just, for the board members who may not remember you from where? So my recollection is that you were the town attorney who helped draft these easements. Am I correct in that?
I worked with the Conservation Commission.
Yes. Okay, if there are questions related specifically to that drafting, we'll come back to you. But I think for now, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Does anybody else want to comment now? Okay, we have a little bit of time, so we will let you come forward.
Good evening. I'm Brian Johnson from 11 Runaway Road in Newfields. The word intent has been used a lot this evening, and I think it's important to remember what that really means. The intent of a conservation easement wasn't to freeze the land in time. It was to protect its character, its productivity, and purpose for future generations. In the 20 years since a lot of these easements were written, agriculture itself has evolved. What once meant crops, livestock, and roadside stands now includes things like farms, dinners, tours, educational events that connect people directly to local food and farming. These aren't departures from agriculture, they're modern expressions of it. The purpose has always been to keep land open and working, allowing limited, well-managed community use helps do exactly that. It keeps farms financially viable and people engaged with the land. In this case, for the limited events and temporary parking on a grass field, this poses very little environmental risk when managed responsibly, especially with simple safeguards like avoiding wet conditions and maintaining buffers and everything else that we heard earlier. In the end, honoring the intent of the easement means allowing it to evolve with the world. It was meant to protect. Stewardship isn't about standing still. It's about carrying that same purpose forward in a changing time for our future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. You're doing so well. Anybody else?
Hi, my name's Michaela Daly Dolliff. I live at 42 Bald Hill Road. I won't pretend I know anything about like law at all. I trust you guys to be able to make the good decision based off that. But I just wanted to say that my grandmother was Meg's best friend, and I was raised, you know, visiting her all the time. I did my homework at her kitchen table. My childhood was spent in Bert's rocking chair on his lap. And if there's one thing that Meg loved more than her Bible, and she loved her Bible, it was dancing and it was children. And every time I drive by and I see gaggles of children just like loving on animals and dancing and playing with their families, God didn't give them the gift of children. And I know she's looking down and just loves it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Do we have any other public comment? Awesome. All right. Thank you all for that comment, for your input. At this point in the agenda, I think that we have some time for, we had moved the rebuttals to the end, so let's mix up the order and we will let you go first and then Amy.
Chair, you had commented when Ms. Gerard had said that she had a plan and that you had seen all the plans. This was not in the submission. Okay, Ms. Gerard wanted you to know that the easement dealing with Baker, the Bluen easement has specifically deeded areas for parking, which is different than what we have here.
Thank you for clarification.
Thank you for your time tonight. You've heard a lot. And you've heard a lot on both sides. It's really up to you to look at the easement deed to determine what it says. That is your guiding post. That's what you have to do as a fiduciary. And part of your fiduciary obligation, as Tom Donovan indicated. There is no language in the easement deed that suggests that this easement property can be used for purposes of use of another property. There is no reference to that. If Meg Anderson had intended that, she would have included that. And this is about what's allowed on the easement property, not what's allowed on this non-easement property. This is what's allowed in the easement. We've heard a lot of agritourism, farming. We've heard the statute. That statute didn't exist. We also just heard from someone very eloquent. The words and meanings changed. But guess what? This is a different situation. This is the situation where the grantor's intent and the words used at the time of the conveyance are what controls. Not what something changes, not a statute that comes down the road. It's what the grantor intended at the time and the language used. And Meg Anderson used specific language and expressly defined what is allowed for agriculture on this site. Statutes are relevant, agritourism is relevant, farming under that, any of the statutes are irrelevant. And you look that there's no language to use the easement property for another property. It's just not permitted. It's not there. You can stop there. This property, she didn't intend it to be used by another property. We're not saying 5 properties down the street can start parking here because they can use it for their benefit. Meg didn't say anything about that, about the adjacent property or property down the street or anywhere else in town, because she didn't intend it. I also want to suggest we have a plan over here that we haven't really talked about. The ramifications. There's a lot of conservation land in the town, and the dark green is what is by conservation easement, and I believe the light green is also an easement property. Ramifications, if people know that you're not going to strictly construe the terms of an agreement, could mean that people are going to be stretching the limits on what they can do with their property. It could impact other people wanting to put land into a conservation easement. Again, it's strict construction of the terms that someone used at the time of the conveyance. Those don't change. I will say too, in answer to question 1, it's no, for the reasons that I stated. And if you're going to say that parking can be extended for what's happening on another property, at least what's happening on that other property has to be consistent with the easement. Else they're railroading, they're going past, and they're ignoring the language that Meg Anderson put in the easement. In terms of question 2, you don't have to rush to a judgment tonight. We've heard that there are some documents, we haven't seen them. We don't know. There hasn't been any testing by the commission of, and I believe Sarah Callahan, who was sent out, raises questions in 2022 and 2022 and 2024 about the soils, the impact of them, but no soil samples are done. And parking is impacting the soils. And we don't know about mitigation or remediation because you have no studies. So you don't need to rush to judgment. And finally, I'd say, do what is consistent with your fiduciary obligation. You're different than other boards in town. They have different jurisdictions. They have different things that they look to. You have a fiduciary obligation to look to the grantor's intent. And it's not what may be popular today. It's not what emotion that we heard tonight. It's about what this deed says is allowed on this property, and parking is not allowed for purpose on another parcel that is inconsistent with that deed. So with that, I'd say, please take the time that you need to have the information that you need to be able to make these decisions. Thank you again for your time.
It's a difficult podium. Thank you all again for your time this evening. Amy Manzelli for Vernon Family Farm. So I just want to reiterate, Vernon Family Farm shares this commission's commitment to make sure that the use of this easement property aligns with its purposes, including, quoting from the easement now, the long-term protection of the easement property's capacity to produce economically valuable agricultural products. That is what this is all about. No farm can survive without that long-term ability. And when you heard about the jumping on the hay bales and the petting of the animals and the running around like crazy of the children, that is occurring on the conservation easement portion of this property, for which visitors are coming and parking on the conservation easement portion of this property. And that's why the charitable trust unit wrote in its letter that she believes that you all have made a prima facie, which is fancy lawyer words for, as a threshold matter, you've made a good case that parking should be allowed. But she just saw a gap in your record that you had not yet collected public input. So you're filling that gap tonight, plugging that hole that she saw in your record. And you now have the support that you need, because you heard it tonight, that much of your public believes that parking should be allowed. I want to touch on a legal concept you heard tonight. As I'm sure you know, conservation easements are contracts, right? They are a contract by nature, and they're also an easement. Of course, they're a conservation easement, but they're an easement, just like a right-of-way, you know, that one person might have over another person's land to get to their woodlot or to share a well. And the law of easements is that they do evolve as society evolves. You can think about, you know, Eversource, Unitil, National Grid. When they first got their utility right away, they had a horse that they were pulling logs to put in their poles and wires. Now they have bucket trucks, and they, instead of a horse trail, they have a 30-foot wide paved road. And that's a reasonable expansion of a right-of-way. Same for agriculture under a conservation easement. You know, in 2054, one is not going to be expected to practice agriculture as it existed in 2004. Conservation easements are perpetual. In 2124, the farmers at 301 Piscassic are not going to be held to what agriculture was in 2004. Contracts and easements in contract evolve as society evolves. I just wanted to mention, you have in your record letters from other Anderson relatives that take the opposite position, that parking should be allowed. That would be from Meg Weaver, a niece, Ms. Anderson. And if you either have it now or will have it, Gary and Helen Anderson. And these folks are very close personal friends of the Vernons. They've been to the farm a number of times. They, you know, they're fully aware of what's going on at the farm, fully support what's going on at the farm, you know, and to the extent that anyone could know the grantor's intent, they do believe that the activities, including parking on the field, comport with the grantor's intent. And I just want to make sure to clarify for the record that there's no soil testing that's required. You know, what is required for the relationship between the farm and the commission is that we provide a management report. You asked for that. We've provided that. So I just want to make sure there was sort of a insinuation that not providing soil testing results was somehow a fault of the farm, but there's no requirement for us to have done that. If there's a request to share the records for the testing that has been done, we're happy to do that. If there's a request to do some sort of regular testing, we're probably happy to do that. But I just want to make sure to be clear that we haven't missed any requirement about testing. So with that, we do want to reiterate our request. I think we're doing pretty good on your time budget, that the commission please try to close things up on this issue tonight. It's been a long slog, and I think it would be in everybody's best interest to do that tonight. Thank you very much.
Okay. That's a lot of information. I appreciate everybody's input. We now have an hour, about an hour for discussion within the commission. We can, we don't have a specific structure. I guess I would start off by saying if anybody has any specific comments or any more questions for any of our presenters, we could do that now, or we can move into discussion.
I just have one question for McLean Middleton. the Donovan letter, was Mr. Donovan compensated for producing the letter?
He's paid for his time and he put in the letter that he did it on behalf of the clients that I represent. And specifically to relay, based on his experience at the charitable trust unit, his experience with fiduciary obligations to adhere to the terms in the easement deed that Meg Anderson created at the time that she created it. And unilaterally, that can't be changed. Systems may change. How someone does agriculture down the road may change. Statutes may change. But that language can't change. And relaying that, as well as his familiarity with the two cases that Director Dempsey cited, and the fact that the Windy Hurst was closer in line to this, where if you're using something for a commercial purpose on another property, it's not permitted. And that was for parking and for planes landing.
So one other follow-up question while you're saying this. So in the deed, section 2A lists the permitted uses. For the purposes hereof, agriculture and forestry shall include animal husbandry, floriculture, and then it goes on. I don't agree with your assessment that shall include means shall only include. So I looked up the legal definition of shall include. In a legal context, shall include means that the list that follows is not exhaustive. So it's not limiting, it's illustrated of examples. So I don't see how that defines the only uses in the deed.
I'm going to tell you that I disagree with that, and the CTU disagrees, because the CTU says this is a definition and it's an express definition. Shall include, and it lists what's included. When Meg Anderson intended that list to not be inclusive, she used language including but not limited to. And you see that language in other places in this document. She did not do it here. She said shall include, and she put a period. It's the end of the sentence. This is limited to those items listed. And when she intended otherwise, she put including but not limited to. To read it the way you're reading, you'd have to add words into this document. Shall include, among other things. Doesn't say that. Shall include, and it makes a list of what it shall include. You didn't use any other language.
You're saying that because it doesn't have but not limited to.
Or among other things, right? Shall include. And the charitable trust unit has seen this. And in fact, the charitable trust unit was responding to the Vernon Family Farms contention that somehow this easement was broader than those definitions and included the statute that we've been talking about that didn't exist at the time. And the CTU said wasn't there at the time, it wasn't part of when she put this together, part of her intent. We heard from former counsel. This language was selected before this statute. Certain words were used. This was a limited list. We're not adding words to it, and to add words would be to change the language unilaterally to what Meg Anderson intended.
Thanks.
Can I speak?
Yep.
So to that point, and I know many people have referenced the Windy Hurst Farm conservation easement. And one of the support documents that was provided to us was a letter, Attorney General's letter on May 11th of 20. But Attorney General's letter to Attorney Kenyon regarding to the Windy Hurst Farm site. Suspect that Attorney Kenyon was representing the farm. on their conservation easement, and it was from Senior Attorney, Assistant Attorney General Christopher Asling. And in that, so we're talking an awful lot about the definitions of farm and agriculture and what's allowed. And I understand that particular easement is very similar and the case is similar. And what they cite there is that, and this is the exact excerpt verbatim, the statutory definitions of quote unquote farm or quote unquote agriculture in RSA 2134A does not alter the scope or intent of the use restrictions in the easement. Conservation easements, like other deeds, are interpreted to give effect to the intent of the parties at the time of conveyance. Unless an easement deed expressly references statutory terms or definitions, a subsequent legislative enactment cannot affect the intent of the parties at the time of signing. At the time of the easement, RSA 2134-A was silent with regards to agritourism. Moreover, reference to RSA 477:45 merely establishes the legal authority and enforcement of a perpetual easement. So in that particular ruling, and I understand that that case is very, very similar. The Attorney General was pretty explicit on the results of that case. So for reference.
So, but wasn't parking explicitly prohibited, the easement on that case? Am I wrong on that?
I guess it wasn't because it was in question. And as I understand it, it wasn't defined in the easement. Therefore, that's why it got brought up to the Attorney General.
Does anyone else remember
You
that?
might know more, a little bit more there. We have that complete letter from,
I know, it's
yeah.
somewhere in the list. Yeah, I thought that parking was explicitly. Remember, Derek?
It's also the way the Herbst case.
Yeah, point.
Explicit in there.
I'm pointing to the Attorney General's letter at page 8. Where Deputy Dempsey notes that there was language prohibiting parking.
Yes, that's what I was saying.
But that language limited the easement holders' rights, the conservation land program, not the grantor's rights, and therefore was inapplicable to the issue at hand. So the reference to the no parking, I take that to be, didn't impact what was just read from Attorney Haslund's letter.
I just wanted to ask how the chair wanted us to proceed during this section. I certainly have input I'd like to provide, but I didn't know if we should ask to be called on or.
I would say that if you feel that you have input that is important, do as you just did and raise your hand at a place where that would be useful. Okay, right?
In our letter from October 6th, we do set forward a lot of distinctions. You are correct. There was an express prohibition of parking. We think that that is relevant to that decision and completely distinguishes that from this case. The nature of the commercial activities at issue were the cruise night events and an airstrip for a small aircraft. So these are not agriculture, not agritourism. We're not talking about the kids jumping on hay bales. So we think that that is also another completely distinguishing factor. I'll just leave it at that.
No, let's not get into too much back and forth. Thank you. Let's hold on a minute.
Chris's
You had spoken first and she spoke.
point, so to bring up more local, what about the burn easement that was denied parking for vineyard events? It's right across the street.
So that was not denied parking by the Conservation Commission. That was the so it was a site approval, right? So that's the planning board, I believe. I don't think that came to the Conservation Commission.
Okay, but then we're still.
Where in this case, the planning board has explicitly said park. So I think that's a different case.
That easement, so we were never.
I'd like to ask one question, and I could open it up to either one of the attorneys, that when you do look at this one commentary as far as intent, right? So Anderson's intent, when they bring up the idea that you can pick your own strawberries
or cut your own trees down. What do you think the intent was? Do you think they were going to park down the street and hump a Christmas tree down Piscassic Road? I don't think so. I don't think so. So I know there's a lot of back and forth with this, and I can absolutely understand why there is this emotional push and pull here. But if you're going to talk about intent, the Andersons had an intent to let people come in and out of that farm. That's my thought on it.
On the 2-acre piece where the driveway is.
Yeah, it's not,
There wasn't a driveway.
not isolated to that.
It does say in the easement not to remove the stone wall and allow parking access to the easement.
Well, I'm just making a comment, so that's, and you could both express that or.
Okay.
Mark, I would go back to, as I reread that ruling, I do think whether parking was prohibited or not, if there was a specific clause, when you read that specific statement from the Attorney General, whether there's and I'm happy to read it again, but whether or not there was a carve out for parking or prohibition or not, the legal nature of that decision still stands in virtually any situation when we talk about the interpretation. So it doesn't even need to be intent. It's pointing out that any easement, people put it into an easement for protection, and that any easement is as intended as conveyed at the time. So when I read that particular statement in that ruling, intent, prohibition, allowance is really not a factor.
So you mean intent of the
Right.
person who gave
So just it's a short paragraph. The statutory definition of farm or agriculture in the RSA does not alter the scope or intent of the use restrictions in the easement. Conservation easements, like other deeds, are interpreted to give the effect to the intent of the parties at the time of conveyance. So what's binding in that document is binding. We're not here to reinterpret it. We're not here to amend it. We're not here to change it, to put our will upon it. It is in words written into a document, and we're to take it as is. So we can get out a crystal ball and try and connect with Meg, but at the end of the day, she conveyed that in a legally binding document. So it's, and I believe, had somebody intended otherwise, you would have put it into a document. So I believe that the Attorney General's ruling in that case is very pertinent in this situation.
Yes, I don't think I agree. So I think that the fact that parking is not explicitly mentioned as a use, to me, there are a whole lot of things that aren't explicitly mentioned as a use.
Your will and your interpretation on an easement.
I have to put my interpretation on it because it's a set of words that does not encompass the entirety of possibilities.
But then why would it be in the easement, I guess, would be the challenge of protecting it. I think, and to me, what I kind of think a little bit more clearly about, unfortunately, I haven't been a part of, I joined the commission 5 months ago, and right into the deep end of the pool with this situation. But when we're considering this, the Attorney General's question, I think it's a very important question. It's obviously coming from the highest position in the state government. The primary question is parking permissible? And I think for us, as we look at that, when you look at what a conservation commission, and you probably know this better than I do, it's our priority isn't necessarily to determine those things. It's number one, protect the natural resources of the town and administer and enforce the terms of conservation easements in order to ensure compliance, uphold conservation purposes for which the easement was acquired. So once we accept those gifts as a town, we're obligated to uphold those parts of the easement. And I liked what someone said earlier, and again, I don't think it's our role when we look at what we're tasked with to reinterpret, to amend, to extend the easement based on external factors. Somebody brought up politics, likes, dislikes. Clearly, people love the farm. Clearly, people love the activities at the farm, but we're not here to interpret those, nor look at them in light of statutes and practices that were passed later. Our duty is to administer and to uphold the integrity of the easement as written.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure I'm
We
looking.
have a voice for the easement now too. You know, the first paragraph of their easement says includes grantors, executors, administrators, legal representatives, devicees, professors, and assigns by power conferred by said trust and every other power. So the letter by the Andersons is and that's a voice we got to be listening to right now, because they are directly expressing the intent and they are granted that power in the first paragraph of the deed.
But we have heard differing versions of that intent.
But we have their letter.
The letter from,
Yes, they're signed off on there. Robin Mealy, executor of the will, Dorothy Ayotte, trustee of the trust.
right, but we've also heard from other people who,
Directly from Anderson family.
we've heard from people who believe that they also understand her intent and her will.
Their actual words, not hearsay.
And I would also, I mean, as has been pointed out to us, that letter was also submitted to the charitable trust and was not given any weight. And, you know, we can choose whether we want to weigh it or not, but that has,
Given any weight?
BTU has not given any weight to the abutter submission of relatives' accounts of the trustee's intent in conveying the conservation easement.
No, I'm talking about specifically the trustee.
So I believe it's that same letter that was also submitted to the charitable trust. And I think my interpretation is that the people who wrote that letter undoubtedly believed that that would have been the intent of Mrs. Anderson, but because she is not here and cannot speak, we don't know exactly what she was thinking. So we have heard from other people who maybe were not direct relatives, but who also have a different interpretation of what she would have thought. She's not here. So we have to take that into account. It may or may not be true, but we have no way.
Yeah, I'm just reading the wordage, executor, and they're listed as that, and it's the first paragraph of the deed, allowing the power to speak for her after her decease. All the other stuff's just hearsay. We have their letter. There is weight to the letter.
And we have our charge, which is the two questions which we've shared about, is the parking permissible because members of the public, though drawn to these other events, may walk the easement property and enjoy the livestock and open space. So that's the question we're going to address.
Right.
May I address the parking?
You may address the parking, yes, and then I have a question for you.
While the easement has no reference to being able to use the easement property for a different property, if you're going to consider that there can be parking on the easement, the parking needs to be consistent with the intent. And what's happening on this non-easement property are commercial activities, our concerts, our dinners, adult entertainment, comedy. Those aren't listed or any part of what would be allowed on the easement property. So if you're going to consider allowing parking, it's got to be for the consistent purpose of what you can do on the easement property to begin with. And yes, jams and jellies, maybe you can sell those, but she listed it specifically. So if you're going to consider parking, and I say Tom Donovan's letter on page 4 talks exactly that and addresses this. And the Attorney General's office in the Windy Point case talks about, doesn't matter, but the primary, incidental, you meant it, you're walking through the field to get to the restaurant. You're going to the restaurant, that's a commercial purpose and not allowed on the easement. And Tom Donovan points that out, says this first question is very straightforward. It's no. Parking is not permissible where it supports a commercial operation, dinners and entertainment outside of the easement area.
But
The effect is the owner commandeers this easement property. It means it's carved out, this easement property, to use as non-easement property. And that's not what can happen under this easement deed.
But you told us to look at the CTU request, and the CTU says we can make the determination about whether the fact that they would walk easement property, would see livestock, would do some of the activities. If we say, yes, the people are doing that and the other activity is incidental, then we have the power to decide that, is what I read that.
I would also say the CTU has directed you. And that Attorney General of the Windy Point says if the primary purpose, whatever that is, if it's to go to this non-easement property, then it's not allowed, because that's a use that's not allowed. The CTU says when there are no concerts or agritourism activities on the non-easement property, there is no need to use the easement property for parking. CTU is telling you that means if they're parking there, whether they pet an animal or walk a trail, the purpose to go to that property is for the commercial use, to go to a concert or eat a dinner or go to entertainment. And that's not allowed.
Okay, I think it might help if we simplify this, just give me a minute here. I think we might simplify this a little bit by asking ourselves, rather than these big questions of what, where, and when, are there circumstances under which we think that parking will be allowed? So, and then we can think about if there are circumstances, then what would those circumstances be? So can we just start with that sort of that more straightforward question? Because I think there are a lot of nuances beyond it.
Yeah. Okay. And to that point, I guess I have a question about for most of the commission members that are more familiar with the other easement, but it's been brought up quite a bit that there are other easements that allow parking. And so I'm curious if those have allowances for parking and what those are and what is, so in Newfields, what easements currently allow for parking? Is it specific to the language of the easement? And what is the volume of parking that we're talking about within those easements?
So as far as I know, the only easement that specifically addresses parking is on the coal farm, and there's a specific set aside that says it's not number of parking, it's an area. That was specifically laid into the deed, but I don't think that any, as far as I know, any of the other easements either address parking at all.
Address parking.
And I don't think there's any other easement where people have tried to keep parking. It just hasn't come up.
So do you know if there is parking happening on those other?
I don't believe so. I'm just trying to think this through. Most of them are more private and more like someone's.
That's, I mean, I think that's an important point because I think we're setting some precedent here that we need to really think about. To that point, one question that I have from the Manzelli, got your last name?
Got it.
Letter on 10.6 that says the one heading says parking activities are commonly allowed on easement property with regards to agritourism specifically. And then it's followed by a statement that says parking may be allowed if it is consistent with the conservation easement stated purpose and does not result in the impairment of the property. And it says there are numerous examples. You cite two. I consider numerous many. I'm curious, other than the Brookfield farm in Canterbury, which allows, and if you can provide me with what we're talking about in terms of just scope. It says to visit the farm stand in the letter, and then it says the Tuckaway Farm and Lee to visit the pick your own area. So I'm curious about those particular easements. What's allowed in terms of number of cars, and are there specific allowances for parking in those easements? If you can cite other numerous ones, I'd be interested in that.
I cannot cite numerous other ones. Those two were the ones that we were able to verify through experience going to those events and looking at the conservation easement deeds. There are no allowances by number. It's just a reality that we are dealing with conservation easements that were written decades ago and do not contain that sort of prescriptive information. Because the nature of conservation easements is that they are perpetual documents, they often speak in qualitative terms and not in quantitative terms. You know, don't significantly and irrevocably degrade the agricultural productivity, right? It's not going to say, don't park more than 250 cars for more than 25 days a year.
But it does say that parking is allowed, or within those two particular examples that you cite?
I don't know. All I know is that what we verified is that parking occurred where the conservation easement applied on the farm property. And I can tell you in practical experience, for Brookford Farm in Canterbury, we're talking anywhere between 100 to 400 people per day, not necessarily at the same time, because their events are often a day-long experience, you know, come, go, come, go. Unlike an event at Vernon Family Farm where it's maybe more concentrated to 2 hours or 3 hours. So that is one data point that I can give you where it's a large scale event. I did just want to say for the record too, that we have a court decision just clarifying that there is not a restaurant at Vernon Family Farm, just for the record, because that was mentioned by the Neighbors Council. Of course, that decision could be appealed, but I did want to make that quick clarification. I feel as if I haven't reached all of the corners of your question.
Yeah, and I'm just going to speak to that question a little bit, which is that I do a lot of work with conservation organizations, and I think that what they would tell you, and no one will tell you officially, because frankly, nobody wants to be involved in this case, is that every easement is different. That they look at every easement, they look specifically at uses, they look at the language, they look at the intent, they look at the potential, they look at the uses and the intent of the easement. So what is the easement supposed to be protecting, and what does the easement allow? And there's an intersection of those things. And in some cases that will not be allowed. Parking would either violate some of the values of the easement, and in some cases it would be allowed. So it's very, very situation dependent, not just language of the easement, but what are the values that we're trying to protect. And I really think that that is what we need to be focusing on here, not so much what are other people doing, but what is this easement? What are we trying to protect here?
Mentioned soils, protect the soils. In that too, though, and within the parking and the parking area, my observations are showing that you also have biohazard trucks parking in that area to service outhouses in the conservation area, which is not allowed by the state. You have multiple outhouses. On top of the outhouses, you also have a fuel cube too, which by the state of New Hampshire is not allowed in conservation. You also have that serviced by a hazardous truck. Fuel, oil for transport. We also have multiple solid waste dumpsters in that parking area, also not allowed by the state. We also have a waste oil dumpster in that. So this is all part of that parking right there. You have 3 hazards, major hazards on top of the cars, plus the large vehicles that service those.
Okay, so those are really important points that
the points too that Amy brought up was like Eversource, and when they access their right of ways, work with Eversource a lot. They put 10 by 10 timbers down to protect the land, and they do not put their tire treads on the earth. It's 100% protected, actually. So to that point, this isn't protected when those things are serviced. The outhouse one's a big one. The fuel thing's a big one.
Okay,
And so is waste oil and solid waste.
So I think that those are really important points. We have these easements monitored. That's the sort of thing that should be considered during the easement monitoring. This easement has not been monitored yet this year, so I think that's something we should talk about. I don't think, I want to go back to parking. I want to focus on parking. So those are really important points.
Let's have to do it there to review those.
True. Okay. But let's go, can we go back to the,
Parking's also going to soil contamination because it's mentioned on this twice about soil contamination. You're washing outhouses out on that soil too. You're not going to find something there after.
so I'd agree. I don't think that that's something that has come up, and we would definitely need more information about whether or not that is happening. So we would need more information about whether or not that is happening and what that situation is.
We can give that to you now. The porta potties are not located on conservation easement land. They are pumped out and then they are replaced. They are not washed out at the farm. The waste oil is waste vegetable oil, just to clarify. And I'm not aware of where those trucks are pumped out. Is that conservation easement land or not?
I mean, I don't
Do we know?
think technically when Emmy's porta potties, for example, drives in, every time she drives in kind of differently. It kind of depends on. I think
Okay.
there's a tractor parked there.
I think did you primarily want clarification on the porta potty issue and where it was being washed out?
I think,
Or is it?
I think this is a little bit of,
Yeah.
I think, I'm going to say, Caleb, I really think those are important issues.
Okay.
I do want to go back to this basic question, is parking ever even allowed?
Could I just ask for clarification on the third issue? I know 1, waste oil, 2, porta potty, 3. Is it, there was. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So are there, and I'm not really swayed by this, everything needs to be listed argument. I mean, is a sunflower field allowed? Is a sunflower maze allowed? Is a corn maze allowed? I don't know. That is not listed, but to me, that seems like something that would be allowed on this property. So the fact that parking is not specifically addressed, to me, says it's up to us to determine whether or not it's allowed, not that it is explicitly not allowed. I also think that in Dempsey's letter, if the CTU had believed the parking was specifically not allowed, they would have just said that. So up in the front, they talk about two issues that they believe are resolved, but for the parking, they've kind of thrown that back in our lap. If they truly believed that it was not allowed, I think they would have said so in this document. So it's back in our lap.
And I look at it and say, we don't have the information of the soil. It's been offered to us. The Vernons also had offered what didn't get incorporated into a site plan, but did offer to do aeration if needed. So they have offered to take care of the soil as needed, work with NRCS if needed to do analysis and so forth. So it seems to me that it could be used. The field they're talking about, they're also very careful about which one they're using. The field itself seemed to be in great shape. Now we've had a dry summer, so it's a lot easier on a summer like this than it would be a couple of years ago when it was raining all the time. But it seems to me we could make a decision about what's appropriate, because clearly there are people who would like to access the property. And yes, if there's parking available in the not on the easement property, people can park there for the easement property. So, I think there are limits we can put on and monitoring we can request that would make sure that we could cover the letter of the easement, which is that that easement land must always be accessible for farming of some type.
Yes, I think that we can make those requests, and we could request a mitigation, a change in that plan. Let's go back to that basic question though. Are there circumstances under which we believe that parking would be allowed? And I can keep saying my piece, but I'm sort of, no, I'm working on the people who haven't had much to say yet.
Yeah,
So let me,
I'm on in. Okay. good.
okay, but I just want, do you have any thoughts on that? You don't have to speak up now, but if you have any thoughts on that, do you want to comment on?
I think the occasional parking, if we can agree on a number, whether it's associated with events or not, somehow we manage the number to make sure that we're taking care of the soil.
And a more specific way of putting that might be to turn it around and say, do you think that parking is never allowed? Maybe that's just a cleaner way of saying it, because I don't want to get into the protecting the soil. Do we think that the language of this easement prohibits parking other than farm practice?
Not on the basis of the discussion that we had and the discussion saying that, that you're parking farm vehicles anyway. And to occasionally park cars doesn't seem to be any worse than parking farm vehicles to me. So to me, I don't believe, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't believe that the language says we could never park there.
Okay. Caleb, do you want to comment on just that specific piece? Does the language prohibit parking for non-farm vehicles?
Any language that holds it. Be more evidence against it than.
Okay, thank you.
May I ask a clarifying question? Do you mean on the easement property for stuff happening on the easement property? On the easement property for someone else?
I'm not going that deep into the details. On the easement property for any reason whatsoever, other than parking like a farm tractor. Is there any reason why someone who is not working on the farm would be allowed to come in and park? I just want to start with that really basic question.
I think that's what the 2-acre piece is allowed for, is the park.
Okay, thank you. I'm really not sure what your legal role on this commission is.
I'm supposed to just act as a liaison, but, and I'm leaving it more to your.
Okay, thank you. So Mark Casper is the select board representative. Josh?
I do not see anything specifically in the easement that would stop parking.
Okay, that would be my take too. I don't see anything here that specifically prohibits parking. I think that there are conditions, like I could imagine pick your own, people being allowed to come in. I'm just taking the simplest example that I can think of. If you're doing like pick your own raspberries, I think that probably that parking for that is not prohibited in the specific language.
Agreed.
Okay, thoughts?
I disagree. I feel as if we're putting our desires and preferences on a legal document that's legally binding. And just to address a couple of things, I think what's fascinating to me is that we're willing to put a view of the present on the past, but we're not taking a look at how the future will impact this. And as I understand it, we're in the documents that I've seen, we're allowing up to 50 events eventually. I've understood that we're allowing 75 cars, but I'm understanding that there's been many, many more. So the perpetual parking of vehicles over the course of time, and to this gentleman's point about my driveway with just a few cars on it has quite a bit of leakage going on. But I don't see anything in there that would lead me to believe that that document allows for parking. To the point of using sunflowers and growing things on a farm is very different than having 200 cars or 100 cars. And to the point of tractor, I think that that's specific in the easement, which says that it's allowed for agricultural purposes. I don't see that 100 vehicles driving on conservation land has any benefit from agricultural, from a conservation, from an environmental standpoint. I think it's negligence to allow it to occur on conservation land.
Yeah, as to your point about the circumstances under which it could be allowed, I don't think we could ban all parking on easements, and that would have a ripple effect to other easements where there's a couple parking spots that are probably encroaching on the easement, the trails statewide. So I think that trickle down effect would be huge in that regard. I also want to go to the language of the deed itself, it's pretty clear that they wanted an economically sustainable farm. Okay, that it could pay its way. And it does cite in section 1 purposes, 1G, it cites the master plan. I'm just going to say, I don't know if I have that, but there's an open space plan from 2001 that does mention some of the economic benefits of preservation of open space. And it says that tourism, it's agritourism, it's a tourism. So I did take note of that. But in the deed, getting back to my original point, it does cite the master plan, which existed at that time. And it says it's hereby declared in the public interest of public, not just customers or something like that, or retail outlets. The interest of the farm basically produce food to encourage the preservation of open space, provide a helpful and attractive outdoor environment for work and recreation of the state citizens. The word recreation is in there, and if they were just selling things at the farm stand, that means that there'd be zero attention to that word recreation. It would be completely ignored at that point. It was purely to transact the sale of food. So I think there's some public interest beyond just customers and producing income, crops and, in the deed, getting to the deed.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add some context about the scope of the parking. So I think the farm had 6 events this year. So the events go from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. So that's 4 hours. So that equates to 24 hours of parking per year. So that's 1 car in 1 spot on the grass for 24 hours in an entire year. So there's not a lot of time for oil to leak out and coolant and brake fluid. The events could go up to 50 events per year. In that case, you would have 1 car in 1 spot for 9 days. So just to give you a gist of what we're talking about.
I just wanted to ask a point of order question about whether the Board of Selectmen representative was a voting member or not a voting member. And I wondered if you could ask council about that.
Yeah, that was something we look at. I figured it was something that already.
Yeah, I actually asked that too, and to be honest, I'm not sure either. I think historically what we've done is we have the selectors representative has voted only when there is not a quorum. Is that correct, Michael?
Creation only allowed seven members. There's no reference actually to the selectmen's representation on the board, so he's not a voting member.
So it's not, won't get it.
Thank you.
I had something that Josh was pointing out about the 24 hours. I actually have a really correlation to a 100-acre piece. It's being completely overhauled from snowmobiles crossing it at high speeds with snowpack. And they've been rebuilding the field now for 3 years because it won't grow anything. 100 acres. It's neighboring one of my properties. They're spending a lot of money on redoing it, and that's nothing actually touching the dirt or grass. It's just over snowpack. That's minutes, seconds sometimes. It's not surface stuff. It's what happens down below.
Okay.
Okay.
What's the remaining?
He was bringing up time with the vehicle on there 24 hours. I was just using it as an example, and it's local. They've got to completely redo the soils in it because they can't grow anything. The impacts just of driving something over, it actually crystallizes the top layer and affects the soils down below just from that. And that's just a quick burst of speed across it, not parking. And
How close is the property mentioned to the Anderson Vernon property?
within an hour.
Yeah, but there can be vastly different soils.
Yeah, and I do want to, I'm trying to focus in on, is parking allowed? I think that's the second question, because we can say it's allowed, but we think it's too destructive and we can say it's allowed, but so long as there's no damage, and then we can say, but there's damage, so it's not allowed. If you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just trying to focus here a little bit. So the question we're asking is parking within the easement area permissible under the terms of the easement? Because, so here's the intent thing. There are, and I'm just going to take my position, you all have different positions. My position is that the easement does not prohibit parking, but it doesn't mean, it's not open season. It doesn't mean you can just go and park there for anything. The parking needs to support the goals of the easement, and it needs to be non-detrimental. So the goals of the easement are this question. Now we get into this thorny question of agriculture and what is agriculture. So setting aside whatever people are doing off of the easement area, and again, this is my opinion. So if they're parking on the easement and going off and going to a concert off the easement area, that to me is not an allowed activity, because they're going off the easement area. It's not agriculture as it was defined in the original easement. But if they are parking on the easement to do things on the easement, and I think this is the point of this question, where they say, is it allowed because members of the public go out and enjoy the easement? So I think that's what we're being asked, is understanding that everything that's happening, in my opinion, in the out easement area is semi-irrelevant, except possibly if people go there and eat food that's produced on the farm. But is there enough, do we believe, if there is parking on the easement, is there enough interaction with the easement itself in the agricultural environment to justify that parking? Yeah. And to me, that's the key. There has to be that link. And we have heard from various people whose children play on the farm or whatever, so there is that youth easement area.
We have three professional or expert opinions on that. I think all three have been cited, both Sarah Calvin, Donovan, and the Attorney General. But I guess the other question is a legal matter. And I'm not a lawyer, but it does state that the time of conveyance piece is in the back of my mind, and you can't. Although as much try as we may try to impose something present day on a sanctified document from the past, just as we're, can't predict the future. So in a legal sense, the fact that the state attorney says that we can't take agritourism into account because it didn't exist at the time, it kind of negates that question. However, we have Sarah Callahan with the Donovan letter, and we have a mention in the state attorney general's letter that gives opinion on the activities that are occurring at the farm as not agritourism.
So I think, again, differentiating between what's happening on the easement and what's happening off the easement. So what's happening off the easement, as I read this, is sort of irrelevant anyways, because we're looking for what's happening on the easement. Are people using the easement? So if the concerts are agritourism, it's irrelevant, A, because it's off the easement, and B, because of the statute. So I think I'm agreeing with
Gotcha.
you. Yeah. So I will point out Sarah Callahan's memo. Her concern was that she felt that the venues that were being advertised as concerts did not adequately incorporate enough agritourism units, specifically food. And I think that It's not that relevant, but that was to some extent addressed in the site plan conditions, which required linking the advertising.
So then to that point, if you have activities that are on the easement and they're not the non-agritourism concerts that are not on the easement, what volume is that? And does the existing parking accommodate for that already?
Yes. That's a good question.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
So
Said if, sorry.
you say it with your
So
question.
I said, if there's, so we're already agreeing that if the concerts and activities are not tourism and therefore parking should not be on the easement, then the question that was raised by Allison was, if there are activities on the easement, what does that look like? And then I asked, does the existing parking accommodate for the volume of activities that are on the easement? So if I were to take my 2 children and my dog to walk, would it be that much draw? What sort of activities are happening? I'm going a little bit longer than I had originally, but I'm thinking what activities are happening that draw people to the farm other than the concerts, and what does that volume look like?
Yeah, and I just want to say probably what Amy's about to say. I don't think we agree that what's happening on the farm is not agritourism. It's more that it's not relevant. I mean,
Sure.
in the outreach. Sorry, the question is just a clarification on whether or not we believe that what's happening on the farm area itself is agritourism and that it's not necessarily even relevant to this discussion, because if you park on the easement, whatever you're doing in that, as you said, adjacent property is not necessarily relevant. I think that's where. Okay, so
Just to clarify, what the court decided in the lawsuit that the neighbors have brought against the farm is that the music, the food, the provision of alcohol is agritourism because it is designed to bring people to the farm to purchase the farm products that they're consuming as cooked food and shopping at the farm stand while they're there. So I just wanted to clarify that court determination real quick. Subject to a possible appeal. Is not a final decision, but that is the current status. Thank you.
I will let you, I just have one question follow up that. How much of the food that's sold at these events, and I'm asking this because I think that is relevant. People come to the farm and they park and they eat food that's grown on the farm. How much of the food that is being sold at the events right now is being produced on the farm?
100% of the proteins. All of the proteins that we grow on our farm are sold. This year, for example, they were sold to 3 different caterers: Mississippi, Dead Proof Pizza Company, and Little IFO. And I feel like that's a really missing piece in this whole puzzle. Is there's been so much attention on concerts, live music. That is secondary to our mission at Burton Family Farm. Our mission is to feed the community the food that we're growing on our land. It's not going to look like apple picking. It's because we grow protein, we grow meat, and not very many people do it. So we have to think of alternative ways to get people to the farm so they can eat the chicken, enjoy the farm, run around the entire farm, and then also shop in the farm store. And it provides for many people first opportunity to accessing the farm, are becoming regular.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can clarify. If you're talking parking in the easement area, and they are going over to the non-easement property for agritourism to go to a concert, I didn't say to eat a chicken dinner or to go to a shelved comedy. They're using the easement area for and you can't hold a comedy show on the easement area. You can't have a concert in the easement area and just simply because you're parking a car there and allowing someone to go to another property. That'd be the same thing again. A mile down the road, we're going to start parking at the Anderson easement so that they can come to our country store down the road. If it's not allowed in the easement, for purposes of the easement. They shouldn't be allowed to park there to do something on a non-easement property. It's like go to a concert, you should go. And then we get back to that line you heard where even if the primary purpose is the concert, which the CTU said seems to be the case, because they don't need this parking area unless they're going to a concert or they're doing something in agritourism. If the primary purpose is to go and do something that's agritourism on this other property, then it's not allowed in the easement. It shouldn't be allowed. They should be allowed to park.
Okay, thank you. Comments or thoughts from, I'm trying to look in both directions. It's a problem being in the middle.
Question. So I went out to the farm on Friday for the first time and we walked the parking area. And down on a lower field, I saw, it looked like maybe sheep, I'm not sure.
You saw sheep,
Yeah,
you
wait,
saw lambs, you saw 2 guard llamas, and you probably also saw pigs. Perhaps you did not
I
see.
think I only saw the one lamb actually, but I'm sure they were there. But where are all the animals? Where are the chickens? Where are those, everything kept?
So, yep. Yes, okay. So you probably drove by the big brooder. That is where we brood chickens for the first 4 weeks of their life prior to, or before they go out on pasture. There are years where we pasture raise our birds across the street on a field that we lease. And there are years that the birds are on Burning Family Farm property. So that's what, with
The
respect
purpose of leasing property when you have.
Oil management.
Going from that direction?
I'm just looking at the CTU letter because the last statement, the last paragraph says that the request is that within 60 days, the town provide the CTU in writing all steps taken to date or intended to be conducted, considering the CTU's review to reach the conclusion that the activity of parking cars is an allowed activity. It sounds like they made the assumption that it is an allowed activity, as well as the monitoring date. Now, we know that we have not done significant monitoring as a conservation commission, but that is something that we can rectify. So it seems to me that the CTU has already expressed their opinion that parking can be allowed if the soil is not damaged. And we heard earlier that farm soil can generally be reconstituted. Now we have to address the issue of the potential contamination that's been brought up. And, you know, we need to do a more thorough job, but it almost seems like the CTU said there's no reason to exclude parking.
We asked for clarification from the CTU because I'm troubled by why they'd ask us to make a decision on it if it's clearly a higher governing body. Can we ask them if they?
Eric, because that's something that you think might have been covered in the conversation.
You, the way that I understand this section that we're talking about, is that parking has been occurring within the easement area. So if it's going to continue to exist in the easement area, the commission should immediately discuss that to determine whether the terms of the easement allow for it. So I don't think, in fairness to everybody in this room, that the CTU had made any particular determination. I think the CTU was very reluctant to make some determinations of the capital thing. That's key. But recognize the parking has been occurring within the store.
Okay. So in terms of, again, these questions that we're focusing on, which I keep losing my pieces of paper here. We're sort of, I keep coming back to what our questions are, is parking under the easement within the easement area permissible. If we put a sort of stop on that, we had some discussion on that. There was some disagreement on that, but we did have some discussion on that. I would like to have some discussion on, under the terms of the easement deed, because members of the public do these other activities. So they specifically say walking, seeing the livestock, the recreation piece. And I do think we add food to that. I think that eating food that is grown on the farm is a use of the easement area because you're using the product of that easement. I guess I would want to be clear that there's a really strong connection between those activities and that people are indeed using the easement and that the parking is necessary. Should I be yelling louder? I see people going like this. I'm sorry. There has to be that connection has to be absolutely rock solid for me to believe this. And it has to be not just people go and they listen to a concert and maybe they walk to the wildflower. They have to be really actively engaging with the agriculture that is part of that easement. For me, that's really crucial.
It sounds like they are based on they're using it primarily to sell food.
It's that there is a aerial photo that was pretty illustrative of the parking instead of it. But I also saw a lot more people than I thought back in the trails and the roads in that same photo that was meant to be an aerial of the cars. And you couldn't count them all, but they weren't just all hanging out by the stick. It was all through there. I was pretty surprised at it.
Okay.
I think the part that's important to me is that last part. Enjoy its open space. So if I invited everybody over to my house for a music festival, you're gonna stare at my garage door and it's not gonna be super fun. But you can sit out and look at the fields, wildflower meadows, you can look at the animals. I think that checks the box.
My questions again, because I keep losing them. So we have two questions here. We are clearly not going to get through both of them. But are we ready to form a motion and vote on the first question, or is there additional information that we want to have?
We had some submissions tonight that I haven't seen, documented from way back earlier in the meeting. So a little bit presumptive that we've heard everything if I haven't looked at some of these items.
Okay.
It also does seem like if there are some reports about soil health, since that's a significant part of the question, that having access to any documents that currently exist about soil health and soil monitoring would be useful for us to review.
I would definitely agree, at least for the second question. I'm not sure. I think that we could phrase a motion on the first question that has caveats. So parking is permissible under certain conditions, one of which could be provided that the terms of the easement or that there is evidence that if soil degradation is occurring, it is being mitigated. I'd have to think about the wording of that, but I think that we can caveat it.
But I think that suggests to me that I'm doing the same as you right now, just thinking through some of the new information that was presented, all of the information that we've received thus far. I feel like I don't have enough to, there's more to consider. So I would make a formal motion to postpone the vote until we have some of the soil, because I think that has long-term implications toward the parking decision, for one thing. And that may be informative.
Okay, are you formally making a motion?
Yeah.
Okay, we need a second on that motion. So can you repeat your motion?
A motion to table the vote until we have some of the information. I know until we have a chance to look at the new information that was provided this evening, and then some of the information that was suggested that we receive, until we have a chance to consider that new information.
I need a second.
Table or continue?
I think.
I think-
To continue deliberation.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Maybe if you want to.
Rephrase it.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is my first.
No, I understood.
Okay, so the way this process works, we need a second. If we have a second, then we discuss the motion and then we vote on the motion, just because we have a lot of people who are new in this process.
Second, Chris.
Okay, so the motion on the table is that pending additional information, could we make a list of what additional information commission members would like?
I think we have some captured. It's not anything else additional.
Okay, so the motion is to continue. I am trying to figure out the exact wording, but basically to continue this. Yeah.
The commission deliberations.
Yeah.
Questions.
Okay.
Until a date certain.
Until in the next meeting, which is November.
17. Right. November 17th is the Conservation Commission meeting.
Okay. I guess I would ask you whether you feel able, because this question is my discussion point. I understand, and I do want to make it clear to everybody here that we have 4 members of this commission who are brand new, who have been here less than a year. Some of them have been on this commission less than a month. So there's a level of information that people have been madly reading these documents. So there's been a ton of effort put in. I know this is really frustrating not to be able to come to a vote, but if we are not able to, please be respectful of the amount of time people have put in here, okay?
Just for the people in the back, could you, on the motion, just outline what information we're still reviewing? I just couldn't hear it. I heard you.
So we have not specifically listed that at this point. There are several questions that have come up that are in the minutes, and that we will also have some discussion if this passes about what that information would be. Okay. Okay. Yes. So I would ask if people feel that, understanding that there is missing information, if we were to move to a vote, is there a way that we could say that we conditionally would approve parking provided certain conditions were met?
We have to vote on the first, well, we haven't second on them. We go to an amendment.
All right, sorry?
Do we have to vote on the first motion and second before we move to modify it? So that's a procedural question.
I don't think so. I think we did. So we're discussing it. At this point, I'm asking. I'm not trying to change that motion.
Okay.
I'm asking how you would feel about that.
People suggest they need it.
What do you think?
You phrase it, I mean, we're continuing the commission's deliberating questions that have been presented. I'm not sure we need to overcomplicate this.
And I'm asking if, just for the purposes of coming to some form of resolution, if there is a level of resolution that people might feel comfortable coming to. Yeah, yeah.
It's up to the commission if you can do that. I think it's probably clear that all information that's been presented that the commission hadn't seen before this evening be considered. I'm not sure it makes sense to make a contingent vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I would say obviously that includes just information that's presented as of the time of this meeting, not anything subsequent. It seems to me that there's information in all this and that I know the folder's huge. But it sounds like there's certain information you do or don't know.
Okay, yeah, no, it was a question to actually the other commission members if they felt that there was some form. Okay, we have a motion on the table. Is there any more discussion?
I mean, interest is the petition that was submitted. I just,
Okay,
maybe.
could we get this electronically?
And I just wanted to clarify, my understanding is that there would be no further submissions accepted by the commission between now and the next meeting. Is that correct?
Then the requested information for the soil information that was offered earlier.
Okay, so soil testing results.
We'll send you a list.
Okay.
Because I think we'll have to look through the minutes.
Okay.
Try and remember, but soil, information on soil. And just an opportunity to spend some time with some of the information that came in very, very late.
Thank you.
Just your request electronic, we'd have to scan that in and then send it to you like. That's.
Yeah, send it to the Conservation Commission email and then I'll send it out.
That's what is that.
So that is a petition that one of the speakers handed to us that has been.
Actually, I have a question. That petition.
And we don't know much about it. It was just handed to me. That's all we know about it.
Thank you.
Those maps made available too, that were being passed out.
Are those maps
These maps.
electronically?
We can make those maps available along with any of the, again, I just, it's a lot easier to see these surveyed plans. Okay.
If you could send those to us electronically as well, any of the ones that we don't have.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we have a motion on the table. That motion is to continue this discussion in the next scheduled Conservation Commission meeting with no further submissions except those that are specifically requested by the commission. Okay. Let's take a vote on that motion. All in favor, say aye. Okay, anyone opposed? Want to oppose? Any abstain? No. Okay, so we are going to continue this next month. We will take whatever additional information we can and resolve this.
It is helpful to be submitted to the commission.
So I think we're done.
To adjourn. Yeah, that's true. So I'm ending this meeting, right?
Give yourself.
Okay. All right.
We're gonna still review the minutes.
Yeah, we're just gonna do a couple things. I just.
Can I end this for 2 minutes? Can we take a break then?